Good morning, everyone. Todd Hussey here with CSP Excellence, and I am joined with Don Douglas, CEO of Up Networks, a cloud services broker. Welcome to our very regularly scheduled and will be forthcoming many more educational webinars on the cloud. Today we're going to be talking about X as a service. So what is X as a service? Software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and all of the above. What we do in these webinar series is we try very hard to limit it to 30 minutes, and I do have my timer here. And I'm going to give it to Don in a second. We hope you find it educational. We try and be interactive here. And also, please let us know of future topics. Don and I actually kind of get a kick out of doing this. Yeah, we probably have a pretty boring life if we have a kick out of doing webinars, but it is what it is. So if you have any suggestions, please let us know. With that, anything else ado, as they say, I'm going to give it to Don, and I'm going to progress the slides.
Well, it's nice to have everyone here with us today. We're going to jump right into our first slide, X as a service defined. You know, we hear all of these all the time. The SPI services are probably the most popular: software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. But many more have popped up: data as a service, network as a service, security as a service, unified communications as a service, and business process as a service. So we're going to kind of break some of these down, look at some examples, and talk about some of the benefits and how they impact customers today.
And Don, we're talking about 6 of them. There's probably another 60 out there, and probably another 60 to come, as we are early days in the cloud.
Well, marketers have been very effective at cranking these out to suit their needs, and there'll definitely be more. So to kind of get us into this, we'll take a look at how big this is. We're obviously getting pounded to death with the term cloud. But X as a service has gained popularity. Originally, it was also called E as a service, or everything as a service, and X has kind of taken over. But similar things, if you've heard of E as a service before. You know, these numbers are huge. This is an interesting chart from Gartner, just kind of showing where dollars are actually being spent. So we can see in actuality, advertising was kind of the first cloud application to start generating a lot of revenue. But quickly gaining now have been business process as a service, software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. And we can see not only have they been growing, but there's some really rapid growth projected just in the months and years ahead of us.
You know, Don, I saw a slide previous, a different slide before I put this one up, or chart I should say, and it showed the years prior to 2010, and the numbers were much, much smaller. So it really goes to show in only the past 4 years, it's really, really starting to take off.
Absolutely. This is a great slide, how we got here. It's taken a while, or has it? You know, it's interesting. If we had a legal-sized piece of paper, we could have gone back to the 60s and 70s, because timeshare systems and a number of these products in the past kind of had a cloud-like feel to them in some ways, though they weren't nearly as popular or powerful as today. But if we pick up with the 80s on this chart, we can see that that was a time period of on-premise computing. Everything was there: the mainframe, the mini computer, PCs, networking gear. You bought your own software, you installed it. But it was interesting, even at that time, one of the observations you and I talked about is there have been applications as early as the 80s. We had Centrix telephony. Really, it was kind of an X as a service. It was packaged as different things depending on what your regional bell was called. Some called it CustoPack, some called it Centrex. But basically, there were a number of hosted services you could get across your copper telephone line. So it was kind of an early preview of what would come. In the 90s, we saw really bandwidth start to pop up, and people could connect to the internet, albeit very slowly. But there were massive infrastructure investments made where companies could really do some kind of cool things internally with their own systems and their own employees. There were a number of technologies that tried to pop up during that time. The ASP model really tried to come out. Gartner was way out on this, thought that it was going to be there, and we know many tried to prove that model. It just didn't work. It failed for a lot of reasons. Probably number one, there just wasn't enough bandwidth at the time. The MSP side really emerged as a legitimate way to out-task things that were not strategic to your core business. And we've seen the MSP side of the market really continue to grow as people have looked to out-task a number of functions out of IT to someone who has the scale and capability to handle it. And then in the 2000s, we really saw the internet mature with broadband being everywhere on our mobile devices, at our homes. We saw server virtualization really take off, specifically with a number of key vendors leading that charge. And then we started to see cloud computing, definitely from a consumer standpoint. Every consumer really helped push this because there were so many cloud services that started to become available. And then for businesses, we know Salesforce.com kind of became a business name that every salesperson had heard of, at least at some point. And then obviously Amazon and Google kind of started the cloud arms race, racing to see what services they could bring to market. And it really kind of brings us to the time we're in right now, where there's just massive cloud adoption, there's massive X as a service being delivered, and there's a tremendous shift being talked about of how companies are really going to get there. Is there really just a lot of hype, or where are people really making these things happen? And this is where we're going to see the emergence of a complementary solution provider to the MSP, which has been notated as the CSP, or Cloud Service Broker, to help people make this migration and help them manage this infrastructure.
Don, to your point, I do have legal size paper. I just don't go back, that far. I know you do, but just a side note.
Hey, I'm just a historian. I don't. I didn't actually compute during that time period. Well, if we look at our first infrastructure as a service that's on the screen, it's something that's probably very easy to understand. This is a technology that has really been enabled by big bandwidth. You take all the physical hardware or virtual machines you have and you move them to a cloud. This could be a cloud that's a public cloud provided solution, or many times it could be a private cloud. But long story short, this resides in a data center somewhere. In a lot of these models, especially when a public cloud provider is used, there's really no CapEx. It can be moved to an OpEx model. It allows your IT staff to really focus on running the business versus putting hardware together. It's often much more scalable because you can turn things up and turn them off when you need to, especially if you're trying to figure out what you need or you're in a very dynamic, changing environment. So it's really something that can be used by almost every company that currently has had physical infrastructure.
Don, the previous slide spoke to the infrastructure investments over the years in virtualization and high-speed networks, and infrastructure as a service just plays right into that. It's consolidation of hardware, putting in a central spot, and having high-speed networks make it easily accessible. So it's kind of the perfect X as a service to be coming out the door.
Absolutely. This next one, definitely doesn't make up as much market share today, but I find it really interesting because of the power and definitely because I'm a former programmer as a kid. Platform as a service really allows developers and development teams to not worry about all the other pieces. Not only do they have to not worry about setting up servers, but it gives them a platform that's already in place to develop off of. And so they can jump right into what they really want to do right away, which is make something, actually build IP or build a solution. And so this can really provide some agility to a number of organizations, and it can allow developers a sandbox or a place to play that really requires very little overhead or requirements for IT to put a lot of resources behind.
I think you're right. I think the future for PaaS is huge, as virtually everyone coming out of school these days is a programmer, and it's you mentioned the word agile. Absolutely, you mentioned the word sandbox. I think it's perfect.
Well, now let's talk about software as a service. This has probably been the most popularized, but we know that probably the most exciting part about this to me is just the vertical capabilities that are being announced almost on a weekly basis, if maybe not daily. There is a new provider at almost all times trying to figure out a better way to handle a vertical market. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It used to be in the past that software was very rigid. You had to have huge engagements to figure out how to make it work for your specific business. It's not saying that there still isn't a lot of help needed, but nowadays it's not uncommon to have a platform that basically is specifically written for your industry from the ground up. And so this really can make the time to implement much more quick. It can make it a time benefit for your staff because it's already using wording and already using logic that's familiar with your industry. These solutions are often very scalable and provide a lot of functionality that businesses really need. Probably one of the best things about them is it gives you a ubiquitous ability to connect wherever you are. So mobile workforce, home-based employees, people who are on the road, it really lets them feel like they're in the office at any time they need to be connected.
And not to mention, from a sales perspective, Don, it's really interesting how selling SaaS, you can do the remote proof of concepts very, very quickly. You can turn on and off your subscriptions and so on. So it's really become a bit of a sales and marketing person's dream as well.
Well, now we'll move on to business process as a service. You know, this is probably one of the ones where you can hear BP as a service on all sorts of things. Marketing has been very quick to bundle a lot of things under this moniker. You know, once again, this is another way to avoid CapEx. It gives businesses a great way to try services that probably in the past may have had a very high cost to get started with, or may have also been difficult to have visibility. This can let organizations work much more closely together with a company that's providing an outside service. This is something I've seen some real interest in from customers we've worked with as well. So it's something that really I see taking off and becoming a much bigger play going forward as well.
Well, this is kind of a business in a box, the way I look at it. Between all the X as a service, if you will, it's really, I'm going to use your terminology, the sandbox, but it's kind of, in my opinion, it's a business sandbox. And you can see the slew of companies that have evolved, that have come up, that are, you know, really started with this concept.
Yes, and I see it growing as well. You know, this is another one as we change slides here to unified communications as a service. You know, we've had communications as a service and UC as a service, and you know, this is a real interesting one to me because for many years now, many marketers have talked about unified communications, and it was the year of unified communications, and you would hear many vendors, many hardware makers talk about, you know, it being their big push. And there's no doubt these systems have been heavily adopted, but that being said, nowhere near at the rates people thought they would be, and many have been kind of piecemeal together over the years. What's great about this is that anyone who is still running off a very old system, it's very easy. This is one where probably the CapEx, OpEx argument is played a lot. But regardless of what you're looking to do, there's a lot of flexibility here. Where I see unified communications really being a big winner is for people who have seasonal businesses. They may have to scale way up. Instead of just having hardware sitting around or seats being unused, they can really scale up and down based on those requirements. The other side of it is that there are many businesses that are going through big change, whether that's they may have to be scaling back or whether they're in a hyper-growth mode. This is a great way a lot of times to put something in place, make sure every worker is highly connected wherever they're at, whether they need to chat or have a video conference, they can really feel like they're part of the team. It's a very cost-effective way to deliver a lot of functionality in a very elastic model.
There's huge value in unified communications, in my opinion. And again, in my opinion, I think UC was a victim of the cloud as telephony was now going from on-prem to off-prem. Now that UC as a service makes complete sense, and I think my opinion, there's a huge pent-up demand for this, and I think I agree with you, John. I think we're going to see this thing go through the roof.
Desktop as a service, I really look at as a stopgap. It is what it's called. Basically, you're putting your desktop infrastructure in the cloud. Then any type of computing device can connect to it. And IT really likes this in a number of instances, especially where you have compliance situations or areas where you really want to try to lock down your infrastructure and not have a risk of a employee or outside contractor or sometimes even a customer working off of a machine that they can infect or somehow cause a problem to IT to have to maintain that or rebuild it because of problems they may have injected into the environment. It is a stopgap, though, because it is a solution whose time will pass at some point. Once some of the applications are completely native on many of these mobile devices, then desktop as a service, may not be needed unless there's some factors we can't quite see yet. But today, it's a great product for the mobile workforce. It's very flexible, it's customizable, and probably one of the things that we haven't mentioned yet is it's great for disaster recovery. It's one of those things, if you have an employee in the field and something goes wrong with their environment, well, everything is backed up in the cloud. Everything is already there. They just need another mobile device to boot up, and they can connect back into the cloud and access their desktop.
It is getting hype, but again, it could very well be stopgap, so only time will tell.
How X is delivered is a nice slide as well. If we look at this slide within the slide, there's a nice definition of a cloud services brokerage provided by Gartner. It says a CSB is composed of 3 primary roles in which an intermediary adds value on behalf of the consumers of those services. So if we think about it, we'll start with the first one up top, the aggregation brokerage. And this is really that distributor model. You've got someone who's very familiar a lot of times with these products. They can help recommend, look at, know the differences of many of these, and it's a one-stop shop to pull some of these together. The other two are very interesting because the customization brokerage as well as the integration brokerage, we might kind of think of those older school terms as being an ISV or a systems integrator, really provide some key roles as well because they look to help the customer make this work in their environment. For instance, if I've got multiple cloud applications, how do I make them talk to each other? How do I share data so that I don't have double entry or some cumbersome way of moving information between them? This is another way, too, to augment staff, kind of from the MSP model, where you have an outside organization who provides assistance to take over some specific points of pain to help you focus on your business versus managing some related products that require a high degree of skill and technical capabilities.
We might look at this, in my opinion, that the CSB is the next-gen systems integrator, if you will, bundling technologies together to what we call business outcome solutions. Because at the end of the day, many times cloud is being purchased outside of IT. To business line managers looking for business solutions, and for a CSB to select and bundle and stitch together and add their own value around that to the end customer. I think there's a lot of value to the end customer there.
Definitely, and just to kind of close on that note, that's a big area that IT is facing today is shadow IT. It's something we'll talk about in a future webinar, but with all of these products running around, how do you get control of them to deliver business value to the enterprise?
Yep. I think we have so turned the corner to IT becoming. I'm starting to use the terminology chief cloud officer, and really working with a company like yours, Don, working with end customers from a business perspective and understand their business goals and objectives and challenges. So with that said, I hope you got value out of this, and I will give it back to Don, but for closing points. But please let us know if you have any topics. Again, Don and I like doing this. So, Don, any last points?
Yeah, we'd like to hear from you. Definitely, if you've got suggestions for an upcoming segment, and feel free. I've got my contact information on the screen. We'd love to visit with you to understand what's going on in your business and see where we can add value.
Thanks, everyone.